Wow, what a wonderful group. Thank you. Welcome from management and the Mental Health and Wellness Task Force. How about my team of Mental Health and Wellness Task Force members? Would you please stand so they know who you are? We have been meeting every other week since March, when it was made very clear to management that there were concerns about support, mental health support for residents. And management has taken the lead and allowed us to step forward. Today is the very first program that we have put together for you. And the program centers around this book, of which there were 5 copies at the concierge desk. And if you haven't read it, you may want to pick it up. Calmer Waters. Our guest speaker today is Barbra Cohn, the author, who is out in Boulder, Colorado. And rather than my telling you about Barbra, I'm going to allow her to, but I want to tell you what our purpose is. Our purpose today is to uplift and strengthen caregivers who are coping and having to work on those coping skills. So Barbara's going to do that for us. We're going to become healthier, less stressed, more relaxed, and hopefully happier as a result of participating. More to come later, but now, Barbra Cohn.
Good afternoon, and thanks for inviting me. Thanks for sharing my book. So I'm in Boulder, Colorado. I'm friends with Jane Satter, and I know some of you know her mom, who just passed away. And I'd like to talk about my book, Calmer Waters. I spent a decade caring for my husband, Morris, who passed away from younger onset Alzheimer's 10 years ago. In fact, yesterday was his birthday. He would have been 82 years old. I would have had an old husband. I'm 12 years younger than he is. And I was only 48 years old when he was diagnosed with younger onset Alzheimer's. We have 3 children, one of whom was still at home in high school. One was an adult out in the world, and one was in college. So you can imagine the stress. Afterwards, I decided to turn lemons into lemonade and write this book for other caregivers to help caregivers. And it doesn't apply just to caregivers of Alzheimer's patients. I want to make that clear. Although that's my target audience because that's what I lived through. This book is meant to be used by any caregiver at all because every caregiver goes through enormous stress and challenges. So the book is meant to help caregivers and really anyone reduce their stress, learn how to eat better, sleep better, enjoy more happiness, more joy, and to ultimately find some inner peace. I was in a unique position to write this book because I was a health writer specializing in researching and writing about nutritional supplements. So I was able to do the research. In fact, I ordered Namenda at the time before it was FDA approved. That's a drug that's usually given along with Aricept to help delay the symptoms of Alzheimer's. So I was compelled to write everything I learned, and I'd like to give you an overview of the book. It contains 4 sections. The first one is my personal story, what I went through. There is definitely a spiritual component. And there's a section where I interview other caregivers. And I wanted to include other caregivers because, as the saying goes, once you've seen one person with Alzheimer's, you've seen one. Everyone exhibits their symptoms differently. Every caregiver has their own way of doing things. So we can learn a lot from other caregivers, what they went through and what challenges that they experienced and how they ended up operating in a world that's turned upside down. The next section is the longest, and it includes 20 different healing modalities, ranging from acupuncture to art therapy to aromatherapy, things that I used with my husband. And the unique thing about my book is you will hear from everyone, every therapist, every other caregiver tell you that you need to learn how to take care of yourself. And yes, that's absolutely true. But how do you do that? So this book gives you 20 different ways to do that. And the nice thing about these modalities is that you can use them along with your care partner. For instance, the chapter on art therapy gives you different art projects that you can do. And what I like so much about art therapy for people with dementia is that so many times someone with dementia is told, you can't do that. You can't do that anymore. You can't drive your car anymore. You can't go out on a walk anymore by yourself because you might get lost. But art therapy, it builds a person's esteem up by showing them what they can do. Not only that, they can help the caregiver establish some kind of communication with the person that they're caring for. So that's one of my favorite chapters. And then the last section of the book, and I'm going to get more into the modalities in a minute. The last section of the book is what happens when caregiving ends. How do you deal with the guilt? How do you go on when you lose a spouse or a parent or a sister or a brother who you may have been caring for a decade? What's next? Also, the first section includes the spirituality of caregiving. And in this section, I include affirmations to help uplift caregivers, ways to create a beautiful space. And by that, I mean creating special low lighting, which is more relaxing, incorporating comforting music, maybe bringing in some flowers. This section also includes some rituals for saying goodbye to someone who is not yet gone, but is greatly diminished mentally and cognitively. I'd like to read a section, a little story that was told by my rabbi about the power of words. This was a real challenge for me, probably the most challenging thing that I dealt with in caring for my husband, who would complain nonstop, especially when I was driving him in a car. He would complain every time we went over a bump in the road. And I would get irritable, which is understandable. Sometimes I would lash out at him. So I think this little story that opens the first chapter of Joseph Talishkin's book called Words That Hurt, Words That Heal is a great way of depicting how powerful our words are. In an Eastern European village, a man went through the community slandering the rabbi. One day, feeling suddenly remorseful, he begged the rabbi for forgiveness and offered to undergo any penance to make amends. The rabbi told him to take a feather pillow from his home, cut it open, scatter the feathers to the wind, and then return to see him. The man did as he was told, then came to the rabbi and asked, "Am I now forgiven?" "Almost," came the response. "You just have to do one more thing. Go and gather all the feathers." "But that's impossible," the man protested. "The wind has already scattered them." "Precisely," the rabbi answered. "And although you truly wish to correct the evil you have done, it is impossible to repair the damage done by your words, as it is to recover the feathers." Sometimes my husband would say, "Why can't you be nice? Why are you speaking like that?" What he meant was, "Why are you cranky? Why can't you speak with compassionate understanding of what I'm going through?" So it's just a great reminder to speak kindly. And even though the person we're caring for may ask us the same question 10 times in a row, in these situations, I learned to remind myself, take a deep breath, step back, and then re-engage. And a couple of times when it just got really intense, I would walk out the door and take a walk and come back, just to refresh myself and to change everything that was happening at the time. So if you're living in a community such as Woodland Park, and if you are caring for someone, sometimes you might just have to walk out the door and walk down the hall and then come back and take a deep breath. Or if you're going to see your care partner in the memory care unit, just close your eyes for a minute, take a deep breath, and then re-engage. And I'd like to read in Morris's own words what it actually feels like for someone who is dealing with dementia. One time, and this was his words dictated to me 3 years before he died. So he had already had dementia for 7 years. "One time I feel one way, and another time I feel a different way. I cope by finding things to do. I read, talk to people, go out to lunch with my friends. I feel just like anybody else, but I'm limited in things that I want to do or where I want to go. I have to have someone take care of me. I would rather be my own person and do what I can do as much as possible. It's not great having this Alzheimer's, and there's not much I can do about it, but I'm lucky to be able to think and act and live a partial life. I'm not very happy at times. It's not easy for me, and my wife tries to help as much as possible. I feel frustrated. I can't have my car, which was taken away. I don't have as many options. Going out to lunch is one of the things I look forward to. That's a happy thing to do. Having people around is obviously good. I like watching movies and TV, and I like music and culture. Sometimes I don't know what to do or I forget things and I have to depend on my wife. When I first got the diagnosis, I thought it was a bunch of crap. I didn't think the doctor had the right diagnosis and that I was pretty much okay. Now I understand that I have Alzheimer's disease and things are more difficult. That's the way it is. I feel like I'm my own being, my own person, and I'm living a life to the best of my ability. I'm very lucky to have a support group of friends and family. I want to be treated like any other human being. My message to others is try to find your own happiness and do the best you can. So how do we find our own happiness? First of all, it's really important to maintain a sense of humor. Charlie Chaplin once said that a day without laughter is a day wasted. So if you're living on your own in your room and you want to laugh, you can get on the computer, look up funny animal YouTube videos, or my favorite is the baby videos. And I always end up laughing, or the dog videos. Even when you're caring for someone who has a chronic disease, you can still find humor in everyday events. And I want to read a few of these hilarious anecdotes. It seems like the closer Morris got to the end of his life, the more we were laughing together. And I like to think that, no, I was not laughing at him. I was laughing at the absurdity of what dementia can do to the brain. So we would laugh together. And here are just a few really, really silly things that he said. When the stock show comes to Denver every January, the evening news typically features an oddball story. One night, a young girl was shown with her prized hog named Cinderella, whom she was raising to sell for a profit. Morris looked up from his dinner plate and said, "What? They're going to sell Cinderella?" He was, of course, referring to the fairy tale Cinderella. When I handed him a sandwich to eat, he asked me what it was. I replied, "Chicken salad," because toward the end of life, people with dementia sometimes even forget how to eat a sandwich. He threw the sandwich across the table and exclaimed, "This chicken is dead." I can't hear you, but I hope you're laughing. One morning, I read aloud a piece about a study in which a potential Alzheimer's drug was found to remove amyloid plaque from the brains of laboratory mice. Morris, who complained 365 days of the year, morning and evening, about taking his pills, looked up from the paper and said, "What? Now I have to take mice?" So there's always a way to find humor and laughing is so good for us. Laughter actually improves the release of natural killer cell activity in a study of cancer patients. Because laughter lowers stress hormones and increases immune cells. Laughter also releases endorphins, the body's natural feel-good chemicals. And this effect can be particularly useful to caregivers who suffer from pain due to stress, whether it's headaches or other chronic ailments. The increased oxygen flow that relaxes muscles when we laugh provides us with a shock absorber to get through the long journey of mental, emotional, and physical exertion required to care for another loved one. So I'd like to mention some of the other modalities in my book. Exercise is the absolute most important thing for reducing stress. And I hope that you all take advantage. I'm sure that you have some kind of exercise room there or classes. And if not, try to get a walk in every day. It really does the body good and it'll help clear your mind. Aromatherapy is one of the favorite modalities that we used. And I'll give you an example. Aromatherapy is the use of essential oils. And when we smell them, it has a profound effect on the center of the brain. It causes us to relax. It brings up different memories. I'm sure you've heard that memory can be directly related to odors, or odor stimulates memories. You may have all even tried lavender oil, which is very relaxing. The book, Calmer Waters, has a whole chapter in there written by a professional aromatherapist, and she gives different examples of different essential oils that can be used for different things to reduce anxiety, stress, help with sleep, calm someone down. So I had bought a little diffuser that you can plug into the wall. You put a few drops of the essential oil on these little felt pads, and the heat will help disperse the molecules in the room. One day, Morris was very anxious, exhibiting a lot of anxiety, and I did this. I plugged it into the wall, and he calmed down immediately. And the molecules wafted out into the hall, and it attracted caregivers and other people into the room, and then they started using that in their community room. And it really does have a very good effect of calming people down. Another one is music therapy. I just wrote an article that was published in our local newspaper about the benefits of music therapy, especially used with dementia patients. And they're finding that when you play music that is recognizable, sometimes, or not even recognizable, sometimes, I wish I could interact with you. I can't see anyone. But if you ever have a drumming circle or a music therapy circle there at Woodlawn, you would see that sometimes people with dementia literally come alive. They remember things from their past. And people who are unable to speak anymore, when they're listening to music, especially music that's familiar, it's said that the veils will lift and they can speak, and it's temporary, but it's especially beneficial for communication with family members who haven't been able to interact with their loved one. And it just is such a joyful experience for the family members to be able to communicate again, even though it may just be for a half hour. One thing I promised I would mention is the value of revving up your nutrition. And I don't know if you have an independent kitchen where you live, but I assume you eat at least one meal together. So we're coming into the fall and the winter months. We've all been warned it's going to be a bad flu season. So you really want to start paying attention to getting antioxidants, vitamins, revving up your nutrition now with leafy greens. Leafy greens are great for reducing stress because they contain magnesium, B vitamins. I'm just going to refer here to my notes for a minute. Also, food studies show that food directly affects your mood. Studies show that those who drink the most coffee often suffer from chronic depression because caffeine depletes the body of B vitamins, vitamin C, calcium, potassium, and zinc. It increases thirst because it dehydrates the body, and it overstimulates and weakens the kidneys, pancreas, liver, nervous system, stomach, and intestines. So if you have the option, it's probably better to drink green tea, which has a tiny bit of caffeine in it, but it also has an amino acid called theanine, which is very relaxing to the whole system. And eating refined carbs releases the feel-good chemical serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter. Neurotransmitters are the chemicals that allow the brain to communicate to the rest of the body. And refined carbohydrates, we don't want to eat too many of them, but carbohydrates also include vegetables. We want to emphasize eating vegetables and grains, especially now. We want to bulk up on the grains, the vegetables, the leafy greens. You want to always include healthy fats in your diet, and that means olive oil. So when you have the option between a bottled dressing and a olive oil and maybe lemon, it's always best to go for the unrefined and get the olive oil, which is so good for providing you with healthy fats. It's also a mood booster. Studies have shown that people who get essential fatty acids, such as is found in olive oil, boost their serotonin levels and their mood. And one thing I want to emphasize is the importance of eating a good breakfast. So many of us have lived a good portion of our life having coffee, maybe a bowl of cornflakes in the morning with a banana, skim milk. That's all okay, but we can really boost our nutrition first thing in the morning with I call it breakfast of champions. So instead of having just a bowl of cornflakes, you might want to think about topping a bagel or a slice of whole wheat bread with a fried egg, a slice of tomato and an avocado, which is healthy fat, or spreading a tablespoon of almond butter or peanut butter on a piece of bread and bagel for added protein, yogurt or a granola parfait with fresh fruit. My favorite wintertime breakfast, and it sounds really heavy, but it provides everything you need to get through the whole morning. I saute greens such as kale or spinach with some onion. And yeah, people think, oh, vegetable for breakfast, but if we're advised to get 5 to 7 vegetables and fruits in a day, it takes care of 1 or 2 right off the bat. So I saute those in some olive oil, and then I make some scrambled eggs, put it on a corn tortilla, and I even include some beans, like red beans or kidney beans or black beans, and then a sprinkle of cheese and a little bit of salsa. And that is a full breakfast that gets me through the whole morning. And it's also a good one for dinner or lunch. Sometimes I turn my meals upside down and I'll make a scrambled egg and greens for dinner, especially if I'm tired, if I've had a really full day. Whole grain mini quiche with half a cup of berries is another great breakfast. A multi-grain hot cereal with Greek yogurt, fruit, and almonds is also another wonderful, great breakfast. So I want to emphasize also the importance of hydration. And I'll give you an example from my mother, who unfortunately passed 5 years ago. She was living in a community such as yours. She fell and broke her hip. She was confined to a wheelchair for a couple of years, the last 2 years of her life. She had round-the-clock help, and she became very dehydrated because she was in the position where she couldn't drink liquids much anymore because she had trouble swallowing. So she was given thickened water and she didn't like the taste, so she got very dehydrated. She went into the hospital, they rehydrated her. The doctor called me and said to me, "Your mother is in full-blown dementia." And I said, "No, she's not. I just talked to her yesterday and she was absolutely fine." And the doctor wanted to put her on drugs. And anyway, she went home. Her caregiver gave her plenty of liquids. Our body is 50 to 60% water, and the brain and heart are composed of 73% water. The lungs are about 83% water. So if your brain is not getting hydrated, you can show signs of dementia. And that's exactly what happened to my mother. And as soon as she got rehydrated, her mind was absolutely fine. So that's kind of an extreme example, but I just want you to remember, please make sure you're hydrated. You want to avoid UTIs. You want to avoid getting your brain scrambled, and it's going to be getting colder, so drink tea. Try to avoid multiple cups of coffee every day. 1 or 2 cups is fine, but anything more than that is going to dehydrate you. So herbal teas are best, in addition to water, or fresh fruit juices or smoothies are also good. So I also promised in our initial meeting that I would address the issue of guilt. Guilt is a big one that comes up for caregivers. And for myself, I tried everything I could to help my husband. We saw all kinds of healers, knowing that modern medicine really can only delay Alzheimer's. Once you've got it, there are things you can do to try to prevent it, which I'll mention in a minute. But as far as the drugs, Aricept and Namenda, they can only help you for, I don't know what they're saying now, a year, probably 2 years at most. Try to stave off some of the worst symptoms. But as far as guilt goes, I still think about it sometimes. It's been 12 years that my husband is gone. And I wonder, could I have done more? Probably not. But could I have been more sensitive to his needs? Probably yes. Could I have spent more time with him? Probably yes. But when he was diagnosed, I was 48 years old. I promised myself that I was not going to let his illness ruin my life. So I went out and I danced, which is my passion. I'm a ballroom dancer, folk dancer, and I hired someone to stay with him a couple times a week at night so I could go out and dance. But after everything is said and done, I still have some guilt that maybe I should have spent more time with him. But that would have been to the expense of my health. I did what I needed to do to keep myself healthy, which meant hiring someone so I could go out and enjoy myself. And no, I don't have any regrets about that. I worked with a therapist, and he used to say to me, what would you say to a friend who is telling you what you're telling me right now? And I said to him, I would say to her, you're doing the best that you can, the very best that you know how. So if you are feeling any sense of guilt at all, there are a few things you can do. You can remind yourself that yes, you need to take care of yourself. You are doing the best that you can, whether that's going to the memory care center to visit your spouse every day, and maybe it's every other day, maybe it's only 2 or 3 times a week, but you need to take care of yourself. And one thing that you can do is write in a journal, get all those feelings out on the page. And journaling is a wonderful way to express your feelings and emotions because you have no one looking over your shoulder. You don't have to make an appointment with anyone. You don't have to cry on your best friend's shoulder or your kids' shoulders, even though they may be readily available. You can write in a journal anytime, in the middle of the night, any time of day. Another thing you can do is, say your spouse has already passed. You can set up 2 chairs in a room, face the empty chair, and talk to that person as if they were there. You can express your regrets, your love, your pain, your grief, anything that you need to talk to that person about that you didn't have a chance. And yes, the tears will flow, but that's okay. It's good to get it out rather than keep it stuffed inside. So before I open it up for questions, there are a few takeaways that I'd like you to remember from this talk. And I also want to remind you that the book is available in your library. You can also get it on Amazon. So I just want to remind you, if you have a brain, you are at risk for Alzheimer's. 1 in 3 seniors will die from Alzheimer's. There are ways to help prevent it, though, one of which is exercise, eating well, having social interactions and connections, trying to keep active, doing crossword puzzles, interacting socially. It's never too late to start a prevention program. So I already mentioned the importance of drinking water, making sure you eat a good breakfast, laugh every day, exercise at least 20 minutes a day, and whether that means just walking around the block or going to an exercise class, any of those help. Sleep hygiene is so important to cognitive and overall health. If you're not getting enough sleep, or if you're having trouble falling asleep, please put your attention on trying to improve your sleep ritual and your habits. Aromatherapy helps, putting a sprinkle of lavender oil on your pillow, listening to soothing music, turning off the news especially, or anything that's exciting in a negative way or even positive way, at least an hour before bed. And you may have to even talk to a medical doctor about it. But they're finding that sleep deprivation really does interfere with our cognitive health. So I'd like to open it up for questions.
Turn on lights for us. We have a mic that's active up here. So anyone who would like to ask a question, Barbara would like to see your face. And the only way she can do that is if you're here facing the camera. So I invite questions from the group. I can't travel with the mic. I mean, I could travel with the mic, but she wouldn't get to see you. And that's what she's anxious for. So while you're thinking about it, making your way here, I have a couple more things to share with you. How about it? Questions?
You know what, if it's difficult for someone to get up there, it's fine. If you can just say the question into the microphone, that would be helpful.
Has a question. All the questions are likely to come when they go home. And the people who are listening in their Zoom in their apartments don't have the ability to share their questions. How about it?
Barbara, hi. Your presentation was fascinating. I have a question about nutrition. You had mentioned, I believe, healthy carbs. Is that correct?
Yes.
Could you give me some examples of healthy carbs?
Okay, so healthy carbs are unrefined carbs. The refined unhealthy carbs are things like cookies, pastries that have hydrogenated fats in them, preservatives that allow them to sit on the shelf for months. Healthy carbs are vegetables and grains. So it's best to think of a dinner plate divided in half. You want to have half the plate with a healthy protein, a quarter of the plate with a healthy carb, such as rice or quinoa, and then another quarter of the plate with vegetables.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and also fruits. I didn't mention fruit. Fruit, of course, is a healthy carb, not just vegetables, fruits and vegetables.
Thank you, Barbara. One of the things that we've been talking about in our mental health and wellness task force is developing caregiver support groups and having folks who have been caregivers, maybe caregivers in the future, to get together and share with each other, as you've shared with us today, the trials, tribulations, and I'm sure some of the joys of caregiving. Do you have any comments on that?
Sure. Are you talking about caregiving in general or for someone with dementia?
No, just in general, just having a support group for caregivers.
Okay. All right. Well, I can talk from my experience. I was in a support group for many years through the Alzheimer's Association, which I can't say enough good things about. It's an amazing association. which provides all kinds of education and support for caregivers and for people with dementia. So I think it's a valuable thing to get together with other people going through similar crises and situations. The only downside for me was that it was very emotional. So when we got together, we would typically end up crying. And I didn't always feel so great when I left. But to this day, we are still good friends. We meet every year around the holidays. And there is no one else in the world who has gone through what we've gone through as young caregivers. So what my advice is to try it out. It's probably best if you have a professional, a moderator leading the group, unless you have someone designated within your group to do that. And that way you can assure that everyone has a chance to say their piece, rather than have one person or two people dominating the group. And it's probably, we did not have this, but if you're all coming from different experiences and are dealing with unique situations, it might be good to have a topic each time you meet. But, just try it out and see what works for your group.
A topic, having been a caregiver for over 5.5 years, whenever I was out with my husband, people were very kind and say, "How's he doing?" What would your answer have been?
How's he doing? He's doing the best that he can.
That's
and
what
it would really depend on who the person is asking. If it's a total stranger, I might say, "Why do you ask?" If it's an intimate friend, I would tell them exactly what's going on. If it's someone I know casually, I would say he's doing the best that he can.
And there's another painful question. Does he know you?
Are you
answer that?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Okay, so I do talk about this in the book. So what I have heard and learned from other people whose loved ones have had Alzheimer's is that the older the person is, the greater the chance that they will lose the ability to recognize their loved ones. I was in a group with young people, and most of our spouses knew us. There were only two occasions when my husband didn't know me, and it was very fleeting. But my children were there surrounding him on his deathbed, and he knew all of us. And his last words were, "I love you." So we were very fortunate that he knew us. And it's my understanding that people with younger onset do recognize their loved ones.
And another question, what's your answer when after your spouse has passed and a person comes up and very meaningfully heartfelt says, "How are you doing?" How do you answer it?
Well, again, I think my answer would be the same as I answered to your previous question. I'm doing the best that I can. If it's an intimate person, you can speak your truth. It also helps to talk to a professional when you're in grief and you're having a hard time, or hospice care offers grief counseling.
My husband died at almost 90 years of age of dementia. He never had a diagnosis specifically of Alzheimer's. On his death certificate, they put frontal lobe dementia, which I was never told, but.
Well, that's a different disease, frontotemporal dementia.
But he did not, he lost a facility of being able to walk and being able to talk, and did not recognize any people in the family. Now, I have heard and have read that people don't actually die of dementia, that they die of a related illness. So I was very curious if you would share with us, what did your husband die of?
He died of Alzheimer's disease. And that is misinformation that you received. Well, first of all, dementia is an umbrella. There are all kinds of diseases where dementia is a characteristic or is a symptom. Dementia is the main symptom of Alzheimer's. You can have Parkinson's disease and have dementia. Frontal temporal lobe dementia is another disease, but Alzheimer's is, it's a disease that you die from, just like cancer. The brain ceases to function. You forget how to swallow. And when you forget how to swallow, that's at the very end.
So dementia is,
So it depends on the disease.
it's, yeah.
Now, if a person has Parkinson's disease, I would not say that they're going to die from dementia. They're going to die from the Parkinson's disease.
Okay, so let's say Alzheimer's as a cause of death. So like, what is the person, what do you see at the beginning as a symptom? You mentioned they don't swallow. I mean, what do you
Well, that's the last symptom. That's the last thing. But all right, so how, you want to know how I recognize that my husband had Alzheimer's? Is that it? Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay. So as I wrote this up in the book, we were in Spain for our 25th anniversary. And I noticed that my husband could not convert the currency, American dollars to Spanish. And he graduated from the Wharton School of Economics. He used to memorize train and plane schedules without even trying. You know, this should have been second nature. So he couldn't figure it out. He followed me around the city like a puppy dog. When we came home, he started getting lost driving the car. He couldn't figure out how much to leave as a tip in a restaurant. And the final signpost was that he left with my son to go on a college tour without his suitcase. And when he walked out the door, I just sat on the stairs and cried because I knew. Oh, there was something else. A friend of mine had a son who was taking the SAT at the high school my husband went to in Denver, which is about a 30-minute drive from where we live. He could not give her directions, and when I got a map out, he could not read the map. I begged him to see a neurologist for 2 years. That's how long it took me to get him to go to the doctor, because he thought he was just fine. She gave him the mini mental exam, which is a 20-question exam, asking things like, draw the face of a clock, draw a picture of a house, who is the president, what year were you born, count backwards from 100 by sevens. And he failed the test miserably. He had an MRI and a CAT scan of the brain, and it showed definite shrinkage of the brain. And I think they're getting closer to doing tests for Alzheimer's with a blood test, but I think we're still a little bit off time-wise for that.
How can I best support a friend that is in the early stages of Alzheimer's or dementia? What can I do to support this person?
So my husband loved to go out to lunch, and he loved going to the movies. So find out what that friend likes to do and just accompany them, whether they like to go out for lunch, for shopping, to a movie. I would say that's the best way. If you're very intimate with that person, maybe ask if you could help them with their checkbook or paying bills. Set up automatic payments online for that person. Maybe cook some meals. I don't know the exact situation, so I can't advise you specifically, but going on a walk, whatever you find that person likes to do, just accompany them and be a friend. You don't have to change. If they're in the early stages, they will be the same person for quite a long time. And even then, my husband saw movies up until probably the last 6 to 9 months of his life. He didn't follow the story, but he still liked to go and hear the sounds. He also loved hearing music. He would walk around with headphones, listening to music all the time.
Oh,
So
that's another
just-
thing.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, just treat your friend normally if they're in the early stages.
Now that COVID is behind us, something that you can do with a friend, give them 5 minutes of your time. I remember when, as Barbara mentioned, the beginning March Saturday, when I went over to the health center to see Marge, I said, "Hi, Marge, remember me?" And she looked at me. She hadn't been talking. I was told by the aide. She said, "Of course I remember you." And that was the last she said for most of that day. But 5 minutes means more to just jog, trigger something, because that shows them you care.
I just want to add to what I said about how should you support a friend with early Alzheimer's. I would say just be their friend and don't treat them any differently, because they are still the same person. It's sad when, it was very sad for us. One of my husband's best friends just kind of wrote him off as being sick. And, it took me a long time to forgive him in my heart. And then I realized, well, he just wasn't able to deal with it himself. He didn't know how to respond. So yeah, my advice is just love that person and treat them as you would have all along, unless they're showing signs of neediness, and then do the previous things that I suggested.
Barbara, we want to thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome. I also want to mention that I do have a blog with lots of great advice for overall health, caregiving, taking care of yourself. And it's called the Healthy Caregiver Blog, but you can find it just by putting in barbracohn.com in your search engine.
Again, thanks for being the first one of the mental health and wellness task force efforts. I will tell you, this is almost November, and in November, Amy Misa, director of the Institute of Disaster Mental Health at SUNY New Pulse, will be with us. And in December, we're going to have Compassion and Choices coming to talk with us. And we have a grief support group that will be coming with us before the end of the year from hospice, most likely in December. And in January, we'll have a presentation by our own Michelle and Ray Smith talking about the issue of MAID. That's medically assisted assistance in dying. All very strong things that are meant for you, for all of our residents. And again, Barbara, thank you for starting us off on this new adventure of care.
You're very welcome. And I just want to say, I hope you all have a healthy, happy fall and holiday season, and take care, everyone.
Next.
There's another thing that I haven't told you about. All of you who are here in the pack and those at home who have been watching, next Tuesday at 2 o'clock right here, we're going to have an extended caregivers roundtable. So you can come and talk with one another about what you heard and what more you might want to share. The task force will be there to help. Welcome, you can come back.
Thank you, Pat.
You do. So many